January 1945. The world thinks the horror is ending. The Red Army is sweeping through Poland. They have seen the scorched earth. They have seen the massacres. But as they approach the gates of Auschwitz-Birkenau, the air changes. The liberators expected to be heroes. Instead, they became prisoners of a different kind. They were met not by an army, but by a ghost, a microscopic predator that the Nazi regime had cultivated like a garden of death. This wasn't just starvation, it wasn't just the gas chambers. It was a biological wildfire that the SS used as a secondary executioner. Today we uncover the story that was too dark for the post-war victory parades. The story of how the Third Reich weaponized filth, and how a tiny insect, the louse, became the most effective killer of the Holocaust. To understand the plague, you have to understand the architecture of the camps. They weren't just prisons, they were biological incubators. Each barrack was designed for 50 people. The Nazis packed in 500. You had people sleeping 5 to a wooden bunk. If one person had a fever, everyone had a fever. Meet the culprit, Rickettsia prowazekii. This is the bacteria that causes epidemic typhus. It doesn't travel through the air. It doesn't travel through water. It travels on a vector, the body louse. The Nazis knew this. In the early 1940s, German scientists were obsessed with racial hygiene. They viewed the Jewish people and undesirables not just as enemies, but as biologically inferior, carriers of disease. This became a self-fulfilling prophecy. By stripping prisoners of their clothes, denying them soap, and forcing them into unwashed rags, the Nazis created the very pestilence they claimed to be afraid of. It was a cycle of engineered filth. What does it feel like to die of typhus? It starts with a headache that feels like a spike being driven into your skull. Then the typhus rash, dark purple spots that cover the body. But the worst part is the delirium. In the camps, this was known as the heavy head. Victims would lose their minds before they lost their lives. They would hallucinate, scream at invisible walls, or walk into the electric fences because they thought they were walking into a field of flowers. This is how Anne Frank died, not in a gas chamber. She died in Bergen-Belsen weeks before liberation, consumed by the plague of the lice. In the final months of the war, as the Allied lines closed in, the Nazis began death marches, moving thousands of prisoners from the east into the heart of Germany. They funneled thousands of typhus-infected people into already overcrowded camps. It was a biological bomb. While the prisoners died, a secret war was being fought in the laboratories of the SS. The Nazis needed a vaccine, not for the prisoners, but for their soldiers. If the German army caught typhus on the Eastern Front, the war was over. At Buchenwald, SS Dr. Erwin Ding-Schuler began horrific experiments. He would take healthy prisoners, inject them with the blood of typhus victims, and then try experimental vaccines. But there is a hero in this darkness. Rudolf Weigel, a Polish biologist who figured out how to make a vaccine by growing the bacteria inside the guts of lice. Weigel ran a lab where he hired hundreds of louse feeders. These were people who would strap small cages of lice to their legs and let them drink their blood. Why? Because the lice needed human blood to grow the bacteria for the vaccine. Weigel used his lab as a cover. He smuggled thousands of doses of the real vaccine into the Jewish ghettos and the camps, while giving the SS dummy vaccines that were useless. It was biological sabotage. He used the very plague the Nazis feared to save the people they hated. when the British entered Bergen-Belsen in April 1945. They found 60,000 people living among 13,000 unburied corpses. The air was thick with the smell of decay and the hum of billions of lice. The British brigadier, Glyn Hughes, realized he couldn't just feed these people. If he let them out, the plague would sweep across Europe. They had to perform a human laundry. They set up massive stables where every survivor was stripped, scrubbed with bleach, and sprayed with DDT, a powerful insecticide. Imagine the trauma. These people had just survived the Nazis. And now men in masks were stripping them again, spraying them with chemicals, and keeping them behind wire. But it had to be done. Without the human laundry, the end of World War II would have been the beginning of the Black Death 2.0. Why don't we talk about this? Because it's easier to blame a gas chamber than it is to blame a louse. Gas chambers are a visible evil. Disease is a failure of humanity. The typhus epidemic in the camps was a choice. The Nazis chose not to provide soap. They chose not to provide water. They used the natural law of disease to do their dirty work for them. As we look at the world today, at refugee camps, at war zones, the lesson of the typhus shadow remains. The most dangerous weapon isn't always a bomb. Sometimes, it's the simple act of turning our backs on the suffering of others. History remembers the monsters in uniforms. But it's time we remember the monsters in the microscopic world and the humans who fought them with nothing but a syringe and a prayer. If you want to see the horrors they tried to bury, subscribe now and turn on notifications. Share this video if it made your skin crawl. Support the channel with a